This morning, job shock. The first official unemployment figures revealing the true extent of the COVID-19 crisis. Virgin bid takes flight. The Queensland Government enters the race for control of the airline. Premier Palaszczuk's ambitious bid dubbed Project Maroon. And a poison tragedy triggers a statewide alert. Wild mushrooms claim a life and leave another 4 in ICU.
This is 7 News with Natalie Barr.
Good morning. Our unemployment rate is set to spike, with figures today expected to paint a sobering picture of how COVID-19 has impacted jobs. Political reporter Olivia Leeming is in Canberra. Olivia, we're being told to brace for a steep rise to the current figure.
Yeah, now today will be an insight into the sheer extent of the suffering evident in those long queues outside of Centrelink that we first saw back in late March. Today, the unemployment rate for April will be released. That's later this morning, set to show the largest spike in the number of Australians out of work on record. The jobless figure likely to soar above 7%, possibly as high as 10%, some economists are forecasting. So a fall of potentially up to 750,000 jobs in response to the shutdown. We know, though, this still won't be the full picture of what is happening in workplaces around Australia. It'll be based on the first fortnight of April. Many more jobs have been lost since then, and it won't include some of the 5 million Australians who are receiving the government's JobKeeper payment. The pandemic also impacting house prices as well. They could fall by a third by the end of 2022, depending on just how severe the economic slump is, how high unemployment climbs. According to the nation's biggest bank, the Commonwealth, this year prices expected to fall by as much as 10%, while rental vacancies have also surged. They are now at their highest level since just after the global financial crisis. Nat?
OK, Olivia, thank you. There are fears for thousands of Australian jobs if a full-blown trade war erupts with our biggest export market. The decision by China to suspend some beef imports has other industries worried they could be next. But the government still denies the rift is due to calls for a coronavirus inquiry.
Australian abattoirs are becoming the meat in a diplomatic sandwich.
We don't need another beef with China over this issue.
But they've got one.
We hold concerns for the way this issue is being progressed at this point in time.
Progressed by China slapping import bans on 4 abattoirs, claiming certification breaches days after threatening 80% tariffs on Australian barley.
You will always have occasional bugbears that come up in a trading relationship.
The concern, those bugbears explode into a broader trade war.
This could mean over 3,200 workers impacted. This is really serious.
The Trade Minister seeking an urgent meeting with his Chinese counterpart met so far with silence, though not from the Chinese government-owned Global Times, warning the bans are a wake-up call for Australia to start sending positive signals. Payback for Australia's support for an independent inquiry into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic.
Chinese officials say both privately and publicly that these are unconnected matters.
The wine industry is seeing increased demand from China.
There's always been this slight disconnect between what the Chinese government says and what the consumers do. So they're telling us that they're going to continue to drink our wine.
And adding more confusion, the banned Kilcoy Meatworks in Brisbane is owned by a Beijing-based private equity firm. And there is an upside for Australian consumers. The export ban will lead to greater meat supply in our domestic market and cheaper prices. Mark Riley, 7 News.
The coronavirus cluster at a Melbourne McDonald's has doubled overnight, with 3 more cases linked to the outbreak. 4 employees are among 6 cases now traced back to the Faulkner fast food restaurant. McDonald's has closed the site for 2 weeks as a precaution and undertaken a deep clean. Authorities are now carrying out contact tracing with those infected, while 92 staff members have been quarantined and tested. It's understood one infected staff member worked as recently as last Friday before being tested. The federal government is seeking urgent research into a mystery illness suspected to have killed at least 3 children in America. The inflammatory condition has been likened to the similar Kawasaki disease and has been found in children in the United Kingdom, Italy and the US. No conclusive link has been made by scientists between the illness and COVID-19, but some presenting with symptoms had tested positive to the virus. Health officials are expected to brief the National Cabinet on Friday. A war of words has erupted on Twitter over the Queensland Government's planned bid for embattled airline Virgin Australia. Late last night, the state's Treasurer confirmed the move, saying it will be known as Project Maroon and is aimed at retaining and creating aviation jobs in Queensland. Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton hit out at the proposal, saying Premier Palaszczuk has almost bankrupted Queensland and now, in the middle of a crisis, wants to buy an airline. He called it laughable and labelled the state government corrupt and chaotic. Queensland Treasurer Cameron Dick fired back, telling Mr Dutton to just stick to cruise ships. As retail stores across the country prepare to reopen, there are concerns not enough is being done to protect workers. It follows a risky weekend when huge crowds hit the shops for Mother's Day gifts, with many ignoring social distancing. A 10-point plan to protect employees and shoppers has been put forward to the government by the union, including hand sanitizer being readily available, one-way queues and limits in stores. The New South Wales Government has conceded Friday's relaxation of the corona lockdown will very likely see a spike in case numbers. It's a gamble, but to hedge the bet, 1,500 nurses have been given refresher courses in intensive care management just in case, and it could soon be rolled out in other states.
Rapid retraining for our health heroes to treat pandemic patients in intensive care.
And you'll keep going down until you can't go any further.
Ben Wright usually works in operating theatres. Right. He's one of 1,500 registered nurses upskilling to take on coronavirus at its worst.
It relieves some of those fears and anxieties about the potential for being put into an ICU, having to look after a ventilated patient who's critically unwell.
A $3 million investment by the state government.
To make sure that if we need to call upon them, they are willing and able to assist us in dealing with those intensive care patients.
If you're in intensive care, you're requiring very, very highly skilled care.
With the virus expected to linger, ventilator numbers have been doubled, with more on the way.
This is not normal times. This is definitely not normal times.
Right now, the number of COVID patients in intensive care is extremely low. However, the government concedes the easing of restrictions on Friday could change that, saying this training program will make sure we're prepared. Because no matter how well we seem to be managing, the virus is still out there.
We have seen overseas what can happen when complacency sets in.
As we work to keep cases down. Natasha Squarey, 7 News.
Some of Queensland's top chefs are planning a big cook-up tonight to help feed hospitality workers doing it tough. 300 meal packs with enough food for 600 people will be prepared.
To find ourselves without anything to do and kind of sitting at home very bored, we just really wanted to help out and really wanted to kind of like showcase what the hospitality industry is all about.
The Hospo Help Out will take place at the Fish Factory in Morningside between 6 and 7 o'clock tonight. In other news this morning, doctors have issued a statewide alert in Victoria after a poisoning tragedy claimed the life of an elderly man and put 4 others in ICU. They're among 8 people to be hospitalised by deadly mushrooms.
They look harmless.
This looks very much like the button mushroom that you might get in the greengrocer or the supermarket. But this is a yellow stainer and this is a toxic mushroom.
So too is the death cap mushroom. Both are deadly to touch and remain toxic no matter if you cook,
peel or dry them.
These mushrooms are very common at the moment in large numbers in parks and gardens.
And in our own backyards.
Because people may have had some of their usual activities restricted because of coronavirus concerns, people may be out and about in their parks and gardens more and coming across mushrooms.
The health department says poisoning cases related to death cap and yellow stainer mushrooms have doubled this year, and people who forage for their food need to be very aware of the risks.
The symptoms that can be caused may start off with a bit of a kind of severe gastroenteritis, so nausea, vomiting and diarrhoea, but in other cases that can lead to liver failure and therefore death.
Chanel Vella, 7 News.
A fire has destroyed dozens of vehicles at a car wrecking yard in Sydney's southwest overnight. Fire and rescue crews worked for more than 2 hours to extinguish the blaze. Road diversions were in place while crews battled the flames. As many as 50 vehicles that were being held for scrap metal were destroyed. A crime scene has been set up. A Melbourne family is clinging to hope that a missing man is going to come back to them, even though he's been gone for 17 years. Paul Wright was 27 years old in September 2003 when he was last seen driving away from his home in Rosanna. Police believe Wright, who would now be 43, is living under the name Brian Hunter and could still be using it or another alias. His father is pleading for him to make contact. There's been a dangerous road rage incident on the Hume Highway south of Sydney. A ute can be seen speeding up in an emergency lane trying to overtake a truck. The van then drifts to the right, blocking the ute's path. The truck driver has been charged, but police are still looking for the person in that ute. More than 20,000 Toyota Land Cruisers are being urgently recalled over fears they could burst into flames. Consumer watchdog, the ACCC, says if dry vegetation builds up around the vehicle's underbody and exhaust system, it could catch alight. Customers are urged to contact a Toyota dealer for models made between 2016 and 2018. There was an odd sight in a Tassie shearing shed when a young deer found itself a little lost. The confused fawn somehow wandered into a sheep pen and seemed right at home with her new friends. The sheep appeared unfazed, treating the visitor as one of their own. Checking Thursday's weather now. Brisbane, a shower or two, 25 today. Sydney, 18 and a few showers ahead. Canberra, partly cloudy, 14 degrees. Melbourne, partly cloudy and 15. Hobart, partly cloudy and 16. Adelaide, cloud about and 16 degrees. Perth, sunny, 27 for you today. Darwin, 34 and mostly sunny. Next on 7 Early News, England eases restrictions, but is it too soon? Photos and videos emerge of packed trains and buses as thousands of people return to work. And with retailers struggling, now is the time to bag a bargain. Next, expert tips to help you haggle your way to a better deal. Coronavirus restrictions have eased in England as the country emerges from lockdown. Buses and trains were packed with commuters as millions of people returned to work. There was also an increase in traffic on motorways as some workers heeded advice to avoid public transport. Under the new rules, people can now spend more time outside, meet a friend or play golf or go fishing. Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland remain in lockdown. There's been a major outbreak of coronavirus at one of Germany's largest meat processing plants. At least 260 workers tested positive to COVID-19 at the abattoir in the country's west. Officials say the virus most likely spread due to cramped working conditions and communal staff housing. There have been outbreaks at abattoirs in several other countries, including the US, Spain, Canada and Australia. Retailers in New Zealand will reopen their doors this morning as more lockdown restrictions are lifted. Most businesses, including malls, retail stores and sit-down restaurants, will resume trading this morning. Social distancing rules will remain in place and gatherings are limited to 10 people. New Zealand has recorded no new cases of coronavirus for the second consecutive day. It has just under 1,500 confirmed cases of COVID-19 and 21 deaths. Checking finance now, the Dow Jones fell 507 points. The Nasdaq was also down, along with London's FT100. Germany's DAX lost 277. Closer to home, Japan's Nikkei closed down. Hong Kong's Hang Seng fell. The All Ords was up 16 points. The ASX 200 gained 19. Commodities, gold is trading at $1,712 an ounce. Oil is $25 a barrel. The Aussie dollar is buying 64 US cents, almost 69 yen, and $1.07 New Zealand. Well, with some lockdown restrictions beginning to ease, small retailers are offering discounts and deals to keep their doors open. Marketing experts say haggling is part of the new norm when shopping as we head out of the corona crisis.
They've already paid for their stock. Now small retailers are finding fresh ways to get the sales they desperately need.
Haggling is not a common thing in the Western world, but if that's the way they can attract customers to clear up their old inventories, why not?
Peter Palomino thought she'd have to close her doors by now. Instead, she's bargaining with buyers to keep trading.
If I can make a sale of any sort, I will. If I'm losing, 40%, I'm still making something.
Typically, we ask for discounts on big ticket items like white goods. That's trickling down to everyday items like fashion.
I think it's imperative that people get out and spend their money. So if that means that the shopkeeper has to negotiate with the customer, that's the way it is.
There was actually a surge in retail sales of 8.5% in March, but almost all of that went to the supermarkets and the in-demand chains like Bunnings and the Good Guys, which actually encourage haggling. But how you haggle makes all the difference. Don't be a bully. Being friendly works. Offer cash instead of your credit card. Ask for extras, a gift with a purchase. Offer to buy more, take 2 for 1 for a discount. And become a loyal customer. They'll look after you if they know you'll be back.
If someone's reasonable, I'm happy to haggle with them.
Brian Seymour, 7 News.
Next on 7 Early News, the NRL goes back to the future as it makes some big changes in the game. And the AFL season restart suffers a major setback as clubs look at relocation options. The AFL's restart plans have been dealt a body blow after the South Australian government refused to give its clubs quarantine exemptions. This decision means the Crows and the Power will have to relocate states in order for the season to be able to start up again. South Australian-based players will also not be able to train in groups larger than 10 prior to June 8. The Gold Coast is shaping up as the new home for the Eagles, who look likely to relocate there in coming weeks. Clubs are also bracing for massive job losses as the league drastically cuts costs.
The game is going to be poorer for the resource drain. It's going to be a challenge for all.
Collingwood development coach Scott Selwood has had to take up 2 jobs since the AFL went into shutdown. The NRL has made the call to scrap the 2-referee system, reverting to a single in-game whistleblower. The decision was made at an ARL commission meeting last night and is aimed at cutting costs due to the coronavirus pandemic. The commission also voted to adopt the introduction of 6 more tackles rather than a penalty stoppage for ruck infringements. Titan Bryce Cartwright is now the only player stood down for refusing the flu vaccine after teammate Brian Kelly reportedly agreed to have it.
There's not too many people in history that would be willing to fight such a big battle, and make no mistake, it's probably one of the biggest battles that's happening around this country at the moment.
Cartwright faces sitting out the entire NRL season. Aussie cricket star Alyssa Healy has spoken openly about life in isolation and the pressure to become a mum. The one-day and T20 Player of the Year says she feels guilty for enjoying life at home and some time out with husband Mitchell Starc.
A lot of people are throwing at me at the moment, when are you having kids? So I'm trying to delay that conversation and hopefully play a couple more years of cricket before that even comes into the fold.
Healy says the Aussies World Cup win is even more surreal, given it was the last major sporting event held before the lockdown. Aussie F1 driver Daniel Ricciardo is on the move. The Renault driver will reportedly join Team McLaren in 2021, replacing current driver Carlos Sainz Jr., who's expected to become the replacement for Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari. The four-time world champion announced he would be leaving the Italian giants yesterday after 5 years with the team. And who needs snow when you've got artificial grass? Two-time British Winter Olympian Jamie Nicholls has set up his own snowboard park at home to continue training during self-isolation. The three-time World Cup medalist has mastered rails slides in his backyard, even building a catapult to shoot a bottle into his bin. Next on 7 Early News, a closer look at how the weather's shaping up in your part of the country. A Spanish nursing home has celebrated having no new coronavirus cases by releasing 100 balloons bearing messages of hope and good wishes. Residents and staff at the home clapped and cheered as the balloons floated high into the sky. The home has recorded no new coronavirus cases for 2 weeks. Taking a look at the weather around the country, a high moving over the southeast is leading to a chilly night and directing showers up the New South Wales coast. Brisk winds in the wake of a cold front are bringing showers to Tasmania. Around the capitals today, Brisbane a shower or two, Sydney some showers, partly cloudy for Melbourne and Hobart today, Adelaide cloud also, Perth a sunny one and Darwin mostly sunny today.